Welcome back, artists. I'm Wyatt Paints, and mind the mess, I'm doing some spree cleaning. But beyond that, this week I decided to do something big. And honestly, going big is one of the main reasons I got into 3D printing in the first place. But it's been over a year since I've done a project that really tips the scales. So when this big gold chunker got released by Golden Garbage, I knew it was going to be my next big project. And just so you know, I'm doing this model my own free will. Even though I did get it for free, this is not a sponsored post. So I'll be grading this STL at the end. Now, Juggalugga Dub Dubs over there has a whole lot going on in his model. But you don't have to be a master to tackle something this impressive. So grab a snack and get comfy, because I'm going to take you step by step to go from gray to yay! So meet me over at the painting table so I can grab my brushes and we can get started.
And heads up, I'm recording this at night so everybody gets the nice ASMR voiceover. Now, I decided to show a bit more of the full process on this one, so bear with me if you're not interested in the prep work. Fresh out of my cure box, one of the first things I do is a dry fit. It gives me an opportunity to make sure I have all the parts and really get a lay of the land of sorts. And here, I'm gonna need it. This project is huge with a ton of similar looking pieces, so don't be surprised if you get a bit lost. I know I did. While dry fitting, I'm taking note of different seams that I'm going to want to address and how much of this I want to glue together before I start painting. Fortunately for me, this base is cut in a way where pretty much all of the seams are going to be covered with rubble, which is nice. So even though there's a gap here and there, I'm not going to be addressing them. Now when it comes to sub-assembly, most of the debris ends up being interlocking keys that hold a majority of the base together. So because of this, I've decided to keep the base in 3 main parts. This is going to make it a whole lot easier to store and display. As I finish up the dry fit, the base really keys me into some areas where the tolerances were super tight. So those pieces aren't really sitting into their slots correctly. I'm going to put a pin in that though. I do want to lessen the appearance of this seam. Now, since this is rubble, it doesn't need to be pristine. What I just need to do is break up that unnaturally straight line. Just a bead of plastic along the seam and then squeegee it up with a damp paper towel. Don't scrub here, just glide it over the gap and you should get a tight line. Though I will put a disclaimer on it that I didn't do the greatest job making this a strong glue, and all the rough handling during painting reopened the seams and I wasn't able to repair it completely. Hopefully it won't be that noticeable. While the putty dries, I moved over to my spray booth to get some drilling and sanding done with my Dremel tool. Now, whenever I'm doing this kind of work, I always use the philosophy of removing as little as I can to get it to fit. And first order of business is this belt. The tolerances here were super tight, so knocking down the high points on the inside of the belt is going to make this fit a whole lot easier. As for the rest, for the most part, things only needed slight tweaks here and there for everything to fit nice and snug. Although this section took a bit more removal than I was expecting, but it's going to be under bricks, so no big deal. Once all my drilling was done, I gave everything a brush down to prep it for prime time. And fair warning, if you're going to be priming indoors, wear proper protection and have more ventilation than you think you need. Now, by now you should become well acquainted with the sheer size of this sculpt, so you have to imagine that this one took considerably longer to paint than normal, which in turn means I have lots and lots of extra footage. So I decided to fill in the extra time with a bit of Juggernaut lore. That way, all my extra painting doesn't just end up on the cutting room floor. First lore nugget for Juggernaut is that Juggernaut is not a mutant. He was born as Cain Marco, the stepbrother to Xavier, an actual mutant. He came across the gem of Sidorak that turned him into the human Juggernaut. Now, his personality has been retconned every now and then, but in general, he really doesn't like mutants, his brother particular. He joined a terrorist group just to be able to beat up his little bro. Now that's some pro-level hating. Now nice and primed, we can get to work on the base, but taking it all together can be a bit intimidating, so I find it very helpful to try to break it down to its major parts. In this instance, the major parts are going to be dirt, bricks, concrete, and then all the metal bits. Thinking about it like this brings a much needed sense of order to a chaotic mess. Commencing with the dirt, all of the soil got a basing in brigadine brown. I just slapped this down everywhere that didn't look like brick, concrete, or metal. While 90% of this is going to be covered, we want the 10% that shows up to look the part. I followed this up with a rough highlight of leather brown. A common theme for this base will be embracing chaos. Trying to overly focus on perfectly highlighting this or shading that will just slow you down. So in this section, you can really floor it and not overthink it. Just keep in mind, this is a dry brush, so it should still accent on top of the darker brown, not drown it out. Now I want to unify those layers on the dirt by using an all-over wash of soft tone. Just don't forget to thin this down. It makes it a whole lot easier to spread evenly, and it makes pooling way less of a problem. If you feel the tint isn't dark enough, you can always go back and do another. Personally, I was good with one. Next, I want to handle the grout between all of the bricks using company gray and a stiff bristled taper brush. This will help get betwixt those tight spaces. Now usually I wouldn't use such a bright gray for this, but with the darkness that are going to be from the bricks and all the weathering I plan to do, going extra bright now is going to help keep it visible. Now it's time to start laying some bricks. While these could all just be the same color, bricks tend to come in a variety of shades. So I picked out Basculus, Resplendent, and Molten Lava to be my standard red, orangish red, and reddish orange respectively. To get a nice mix of them, I painted about half the bricks while skipping around with my first color, then half again for the second and subsequent third. Without too much trouble, I ended up with a nice random pattern. While I get bricked up, here's a quick lord up on Jugs. In an alternate timeline, Juggernaut got Jedi mind tricked into a suicide mission. They shrunk him down and shot him like a bullet at near the speed of light straight through Thanos' skull. He ended up smearing his brains across centuries. The real tragic part about this story is that the Juggernaut is immortal, and because of his powers, there's nothing that's going to be able to stop him. So he's going to continue traveling at nearly the speed of light until the end of time. Now that's a dark ending. Now that I'm all bricked up, I can go back and finish off blocking in the cement using ash gray. I'm going with a slightly darker gray here because I'm going to have a whole lot more control when it comes to contrast in these areas. And heads up, this is the step where we need to start painting clean, especially when we're cutting out the cement areas above the bricks. With everything dry, I thought it was a good idea to put everything together to make sure things are consistent. Like finding out I need to extend the cement on these wall pieces a bit, and a few bricks on the lip got missed. No worries, it's an easy fix before moving on to weathering. Now, the weathering step is going to help beautify everything together and give much needed definition to all the cracks, while also toning down everything and dirtying them up. Bonus is, I can do this in one step using thinned down black ink. Now, don't let the liquidity of ink fool you. Unless you're using this for a panel wash, you want to thin it. Even then, I had a paper towel handy to blot up any excess wash. Just take it section by section, being sure to catch any pooling before you set it down to dry. Extra bit of lore drop, one of Juggernaut's abilities is unstoppable nature once he gets moving. But that's not 100% true, because in fact, there is one character that has stopped Juggernaut, dead in his tracks, and that was the Hulk. But there's a small asterisk on that. It was Hulk powered up to become the fourth horseman of Apocalypse, although thinking about it, perhaps a gladiator could stop him if he was really confident that day. Now that the shadows are sorted, it's time to build up some highlights. First up is the concrete using ash. Using a medium dry brush here is going to push back all the extra shadows and clean them up a bit. That said, I do want to build up a bit more of the highlight on the broken edges, as these would be fresher breaks and have less muck on it. So while I'm on the top, I'm using a super light touch so I only really pick up the cracks as much as I can. And extra care is going to be needed when it comes to the wall parts, so it's a good idea to slow it down and be precise. Next up is those bricks, and Blood Chalice is going to be the secret sauce here as a super light dry brush. It may seem weird to highlight all the bricks in one go just using one color, but there's a reason for it. The reason for this goes hand in hand with the black wash we did earlier. Both steps act as filters that shift the bricks towards a single hue. But with the red as a light dusting, it's going to be super subtle so that the various tones we put into the bricks won't go to waste. One thing to note though is that this highlight will be really hard to judge on the more orangey bricks, so I'm keeping an eye on the darkest ones. Once I see the highlight forming, I move on from the area, trusting that the other bricks are good as well. Taking care of the bricks gave the concrete highlights plenty of time to dry. So I came back with Brigade for a controlled dry brush just to highlight all the edges and get a bit of the cement that was still on the wall section. And you gotta keep in mind, this is not a step to rush. The goal is to place trace amounts of paint very deliberately, so it's gonna take time. While the concrete cures, I'm going to start prepping up those metal bits. Starting with resetting all the rebar back to black. 9 times out of 10, having a black base for your metallics is going to be your best starting point. While the rebar dries, let's take a look at these parts here. There seems to be little extra bits of rubble on top of the other rubble. And while we could totally leave it as is, I'm feeling a bit frisky and my hand is steady, so using Basilisk Rag, I picked out those chips and added a bit more visual detail. Then I noticed the same kind of chunks on the bricks, so I switched to my concrete and did those as well. After which, a quick detail wash helped them blend in with the rest of the base. Now, the very last thing I do before breaking out the metallics is this gunk in the sewer, and that is definitely some Colossus poop. Who else do you think is backing up an 18-inch sewer pipe? But in order to keep this fun and way less gross, I'm making this some generic green gunk, using Guardian Green for the base, a wild green highlight, and a green tone shade. Easy peasy. And finally, it's time for the true metallics to come out, and as usual, gunmetal is going to be the star player. Just a quick and simple dry brush pass chromes up the pipe and rebar. Then, when my brush has barely any pigment left, I tackled the I-beams. At this low level of a load, it takes a bit of furious stroking to really see results, but I am trying to go for this graphite look, so it's going to take the time. I know typically these are deep orange red, but with all the bricks and Jug's outfit, this statue is already going to be very red heavy. Having some dark steel beams feels like it'll help break it up a bit. To give the gunmetal some drying time, let's take a look at this school plaque. Nothing too complicated here, so I'm going to shoot for some patinaed brass. Step 1, throw a thin solid base of one of my favorite colors, death metal. Really work this into all the places in between the letters. This might take some doing with the smaller letters. And then I switch to a smaller brush and greedy gold for a highlight. My goal here is to get 100% coverage on the letters, 60% coverage on the ring, and the background only get a very patchy 20%. Putting it all together, it adds a nice amount of age to it. Switching back to the rebar, them being plain gunmetal kind of gets them lost in that gray background. So to rectify this, it's our old buddy, Dirty Down Rust. My main priority here is to make them not gray, so just slap it on and let it work. If you really wanted some of the shine back, you can always hit these up with another touch of gunmetal, but I was happy with the look. The final bed of metal is the one and only base prop, Cerebro. This is usually shown as silver or sometimes with a touch of blue like cobalt, but I'm going to call an audible here and go with tainted gold. This is actually a slightly green gold, so I'm hoping it's going to help it stand out amongst all the other details. And just so it doesn't look too plain Jane, I used gunmetal to do the accent cable and the little bulbs. It's just a little something to make it look a little bit more grounded.
With the base all done, I'd like to take a short intermission to thank all my subscribers over on Patreon. Here in California, gas is now tipped over $6 a gallon, and yet these titans of generosity still dig deep. Whether you're an OnlyFan or a board member, these contributions are able to make giant projects like this come to life. In fact, especially projects like this, because we're not sponsored today. So I truly can't thank you enough. If you would like to join the Painting Pantheon, you'll find a link to my Patreon down below. Or you can support the video right here in its fight against the algorithm with a like, comment, maybe even a share. Yeah, I know it's annoying for me to ask, but I gotta grow. Don't tell me what to do. Engagement's engagement, baby. But I'm really counting on to the core fans to really boost the signal of the channel. With that said, I think it's time we get back to work. Why? Because I'm the Juggernaut!
Now I'm perusing through Kane's looks over the years. While the general design stays mostly the same outside of special situations, what has changed a lot over the years is the colors. Sometimes he's reddish brown, then brownish red, then randomly just brown or red, or both. At the end of the day, I think the most important thing is to try to match the deep copper color of his helmet with his suit. But trying to match a non-metallic to a metallic is kind of a pain, so I chose to split the difference and go with both reddish brown and brownish red. For the brownish red sections, I grabbed his shoes, upper chest, and shorts to base in brigadine brown. This is an all over opaque base, so you can kind of just space out so long as you keep the paint thin. During my space out, this is when I noticed something about Jugs for the first time. His costume is pretty much a skin-tight leotard with matching boots, crop top, and hot pants. Yeah, those are definitely hot pants. If I'm gonna be cursed with this knowledge, so are you. I guess this is why his shorts are usually the same color as his tights, but for me it's a bit too matchy-matchy, and in the comics it always reminded me of wrestling pants. No knock on wrestling, but pass. Once the brown was dry, the next step was to add a dry brush of Wyvern Fury. With such a bright color highlighted on the brown undercoat, it should end up as a very rugged red with deep brown roots. Just keep a light touch. This highlight should only catch on the surface texture of the leather, so just ease it up. And for a quick lore dump, while he's almost always seen in his armor, Juggernaut can take it off. Outside of the suit, he's still huge, but he ends up looking like a human-colored Hulk. And, believe it or not, he hooked up with She-Hulk at least once. Jennifer does love her bad boys. Then, the boots got their soles blacked out, followed by a deep gray highlight. Moving on to the lighter reddish brown for the legs and torso, I'm going with leather brown for the base. Just slap this on as quick as you can. I followed it up with a very light highlight of Resplendent. Here, I'm keeping my strokes perpendicular to the ribbing detail to slowly push them towards red. And because of the very light background, it's going to be paramount to keep very strict control on your paint load. Finally, I threw down some light tone for the pant seams and then set it off to dry. Next up is his belt, and it should be a cinch. First, let's chrome up the studs with some gunmetal. Then come back and base the main body of the belt with bootstrap. And of course, soft tone to add some separation for all the tight details. Then finally, leather brown to lift those colors a bit. If you keep very tight brush control, you should be able to highlight the two detail straps without having to paint them specifically. Best tip for this is to go lighter than you think you need and just let it build up for you. Getting close to the finish line, it's time for some skincare, and here is where I reminded myself this isn't a sponsored post, so I can get a bit goofy. How about Marvel Zombie Juggernaut? I don't believe I ever saw him turned in the comic, but if they got Hulk, I'm pretty sure they can get him. So for this, I want the skin tone to be nice and desaturated, with just bare hints of normal flesh. To get this started, I use an obsidian skin base. A quick overbrush can handle this, and it'll give me enough time to warn you. I'm gonna be breaking my streak of airbrush-free projects. There's just so much skin to cover, and after how long that base took, if I did this with a brush, it would have added at least a few extra days. So I hope you can bear with me as I break my streak and head into the spray booth. Yeah, I know, big lighting difference, but we won't be here long. First color up, amber skin. Now, one of the biggest advantages of an airbrush is the ability to lay down super thin layers, but it requires a bit more prep work to get it ready. Straight from the tube, it is way too thick. To thin it down, I'm using golden airbrush medium at about 50-50, followed by a couple of drops of flow improver. Then I top it off with a small amount of water, roughly about half as much as I used as the medium to start. Then give it a good mix. At this point, it's about the thickness of half and half, but I'm gonna need it a bit thinner, so a touch more water. Then a quick pass through a mesh strainer I got off of Amazon and I was ready to go. These aren't entirely necessary, but since I've started using them, I've had almost zero clogs. When spraying the face, I need to be extra mindful of the angle that I'm spraying at. This is to preserve some of the obsidian, so I'm going to restrict my spray to straight ahead and above. This will give me some natural fall off to the shadows while protecting under the jaw. Keep in mind, I don't really need to paint most of this head as the helmet is going to be covering it. So if you want to lower your workload, just focus on the front of the face and you should be fine. For the hands, keep the highlight onto the fingers in the back of the hand while only letting it creep underneath. This side is going to be facing the wall, so I'm not too concerned with it. When it comes to the arms, I'm going to focus most of this on the top side of the arm as it sits on the model. Basically just filling in the shapes using strokes that follow the grain of the muscle should put you in the right direction, while also making it easier to preserve the shadows and the striations. As for the sides, I wanted to go from a full highlight at the top to a drop off at the equator line. This will help establish the direction of the light. I'll most likely have to extend it to the underside, but I want to wait until I do the underside so I know what level of saturation I'm going to have to blend to. On the underside, I start light. Like if the top is 100%, I start the bottom half at 25%, so that the brightest area on the bottom is about as dark as the darkest area on the top. If there isn't enough contrast to see the definition in the muscles, you can step this up a bit. But just keep in mind two things. This needs to look like shadow, and it still needs blending at the equator. Now, before I move on to the next highlight, I thin down some purple tone to draw in his veins. It's kind of an inevitable thing for me to make these a little too dark and need excessive top coats to fade it out. So do your best to thin it and trust it's gonna be dark enough. With amber skin still on my brush, I went back over the purple to just feather those edges away to become a bit more ambiguous. but I do want to still keep this light as I still have another highlight to do. And that highlight is quartz skin. This time when I'm shooting the face, I'm going to maintain an extreme angle from above. Many of you should recognize the steps I'm using on the head as very similar to the zenithal lighting method. Using it to spray your skin tones will give you quick and easy dramatic shadows and highlights in one go. For the arms, the same principle applies. I want to spray this from above to keep the lighting consistent. Whatever catches on the side from this angle is fine, so long as you don't do any creative leaning. Back at the normal table, I'm zooming in to take care of Kane's sadistic mug. Now, Marvel Zombie eyes flux between white, red glow, or even orange glow. Being the odd man out, I drop the white and split the difference for red-orange glowing eyes. Step 1 is a deep red base of basilisk. You want to do your best to maintain a black ring visible all the way around the eye. If you mess up, no big deal. Just reset it back to black and try again. This time with less paint on your brush. Next, I used pure red to create small almond slivers in the middle area within the basilisk. Hopefully, any mishaps during the last step will instill an importance of watching your paint load. You don't want to relearn that lesson again. Finally, a wisp of molten lava right down the center of each will get them home. Moving down to his mouth, Mage Cast Magenta got dabbed in for his decaying gums. Then I used skeletal bone to cut out the shape of each tooth. Next, to gunk everything up, a bit of light tone across the teeth and gums gets everything nice and grimy. If this gets a bit too gross, you can always come back with some thinned down skeletal bone and reset it. Now for the lips, I kept things nice and simple and just used a bit of dark tone to stain them in. Just follow the shape and contours of the mouth and it should be pretty easy. Last thing to go is his eyebrows, and while his skin got desaturated, I feel his hair would stay the same. So each got a fur-bound base followed by a molten lava dry brush. Using a little stubby dry brush like this can make it super easy. And the face is done. Moving on to the metallic armored pieces, as usual, a quick reset of black is always the first step, followed by some masking to protect the skin. While I feel pretty confident with my aim not to use it, there's no use in taking a risk that a few minutes of preparation will completely prevent. Then I had to dig deep and hunt down a color that would be dark enough for jugs here. And I was able to find this very old bottle of hammered copper that would be just perfect. For it, I'm using a medium dry brush looking to cover about 50% of the surface. The sculpted texture here should give me a well patinaed copper in no time. Now I just need to repeat this intensity across all the other armor parts. After yanking off the mask, I faded in some skeletal bone for the fingernails, then each got a light outline and detailing with dark tone. Last, I used night scales to add a bit of contrast on the helm by topping off the little rivets in this very dark blue metallic. Now I can't just make a zombie without any blood and gore, and of course, my blood is going to be my go-to, blood for the blood god. For the gore, I'm ripping up tiny bits of toilet paper into the paint to be my hunks of flesh. The cheaper, the better. So if you got 2-ply, you're going to want to split the sheets or it'll get too clumpy. And FYI, the tissue is going to pull a good amount of moisture from the paint. So be ready for this with a bit of water before mixing well. Now for the application, I kind of want to tell a depressing story. The idea being that Zombie Jugs doesn't take off his helmet at all. So he just repeatedly smashes victims into his mouth hole, only for not a single drop to reach his lips. So on the helmet, I want a gore patch that centers on the mouth, then expands out as the slop travels down the dome. And I don't really want to overload it, so only a few chunks here and there. For his upper chest, I want to continue expanding the gore slide until it reached the peak of his chest, then taper back down as it moves towards his belt. And of course, I can't forget to put a few chunks here and there in obvious places. For the placement on the hands, I imagine him lifting his victim up with both hands like this to feed. If they popped like this, there's going to be a large amount that would pool in the web between the thumb and the index finger before flowing off. So I started there and just went by feel. To finish off the gore, I threw a few bits on his forward leg and foot, after which I called this one done. Holy stinking muties, artist! This model is a beast! I really can't understate it. It's so big I couldn't fit it on my turntable, so you're gonna have to take it all in sections. But dang, it sure does feel good finishing a large project like this. Doing a final weigh-in, this model sits at nearly 10 pounds on the shelf, and that doesn't even take into consideration all the resin used for supports. Rough estimate, about 5 to 6 kilograms of resin. But dang, look at it, it's massive! And hey, I haven't forgot, since this isn't a sponsored post, along with the goofy paint choice, I'm gonna be doing a full grading on this STL. But again, full disclosure, I did get this model for free. Let's look at the pros. It is a highly detailed model, down to having sculpted finger and palm prints. Plus, when it comes to print options, included were different variations of helmet on, helmet off, helmet damaged, but there was also a completely alternate sculpt for his chest if you wanted him in his black X-Men uniform. And once again, top tier cuts and near flawless pre-hollowed and supported files. These kind of things cut down on the pre-production of every project, and I'm all for it. Now for the cons. Once again, this is a big model, like really big. Big enough for me to stress caution that you should understand the level of commitment something like this will have to take. Even though it's cut to be printable on most printers, my large print bed still took almost 2 weeks to print everything out. Now, you can always scale everything down to mitigate this, but I wonder how far you can push that before the finer details lose their readability. And to be fair, of all characters, Juggernaut certainly deserves a large sculpt to capture him. But I can't help the feeling that I think it could have been done with about 50% less base, which ultimately is a large pile of broken rubble. Deep down, it kinda hurt to use so much resin for so many bricks. Second con, and it's kinda related to the first, with such a large base, it's a bit disappointing that there were only 2 items on the base that point to where it is, the plaque and cerebro. This is a mountain of real estate committed to resin, and 99% of it is filled with generic rubble. don't get me wrong, it's all very well sculpted. But with that big of a footprint, one of those wall pieces could have been a broken Blackbird wing or part of the danger room exposed. Or maybe a broken Sentinel head. I don't know, something. Anything over more bricks. Again, beautifully sculpted, but it could have been slimmed down while better utilizing the space it has. Overall, I give this a grade of A-. It's a very high detailed sculpt, but it shouldn't be anyone's first project. It has a resin cost that'll unfortunately keep it stuck in a lot of hobbyists' to be printed someday folder. But if you're up for the challenge, this will test your printing skills, model building, and painting skills. Just be sure to have the space available for when it's done. Wow, that was a very, very long one, but you made it to the end. I'm gonna get going to start the next project, so as always, thank you for watching, stay creative, and always enjoy the process.